We know those numbers are not the full picture because many cases are not confirmed. Many people have not been tested. The most immediate challenge to our healthcare system right now is a lack of personal protective equipment for frontline workers. And the American president is making things harder. Donald Trump told 3M it must stop exporting to Canada any N95 masks made in the United States. 3M immediately pushed back. It said in a statement, ceasing all export of respirators produced in the United States would likely cause other countries to retaliate and do the same, as some have already done. If that were to occur, the net number of respirators being made available to the U.S. would actually decrease. 3M makes 1.1 billion masks a year worldwide, none in Canada. President Trump has invoked the Defense Production Act to produce more supplies there. He's facing growing criticism outside the U.S. for his approach. Mercedes Stephenson joins me now. Mercedes, the president is making some enemies in a few places right now.
Yeah, Donna, and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau pushed back against this today, saying that it would be a bad idea and a mistake for either country to start restricting essential medical goods or services. And while he didn't threaten retaliation, he seemed to hint at it, noting that Canadian nurses are key and cross the border into places like Detroit every day to take care of American COVID-19 patients. Chrystia Freeland, the Deputy Prime Minister, said that Canada will do whatever it needs to in its national interests. But it doesn't appear that Donald Trump is hearing those appeals from north of the border. He just spoke at the White House, and this is what he had to say.
Both the government of Canada and 3M are pushing back on this DPA not to export N95 respirators. 3M says...
I don't blame them. They can push back if they want. We're not happy with 3M. We're not happy. And the people that dealt with it directly are not at all happy with 3M.
Premier Doug Ford also not happy with this situation. This is what he said to reporters earlier this afternoon.
I just can't stress how disappointed I am with President Trump for making this decision. I understand, he's thinking I got to take care of my own people, but we're connected, and but even in saying that, I'm not going to rely on President Trump.
Now, Donna, a senior Canadian official told me that the CEO of 3M spoke to the Minister of Procurement earlier today and assured her that no shipments have been canceled or diverted at this time. We'll have to see what happens now that President Donald Trump has spoken again.
Mercedes, there is such urgency for PPE. Any sign today that more is on the way?
No updates on the number at this time, Donna, but the premiers did talk with the Prime Minister last night and agreed that they need to share to make sure those who need it most get it. New Brunswick and Newfoundland and Labrador expected to potentially be the worst off. The government trying to come up with innovative ways to deliver that material when it arrives, signing essentially a deal with Amazon to make those deliveries. Donna?
Okay, Mercedes Stephenson in Ottawa, thanks. Healthcare workers in the U.S. are dying, and they are begging, too, for more protective equipment. There are now more than 250,000 confirmed cases of COVID-19 in the U.S. That's a quarter of all the reported cases in the world. More than 500 people died in New York State in just 24 hours. Ms. Jackson Proskow reports frontline workers are beyond desperate.
You can see all the rooms are filled.
The calls for equipment and help are growing more desperate.
Last night before I went to bed, we had over 60 patients waiting for a hospital bed.
Outside one Manhattan hospital, nurses staged a protest.
3 nurses, all COVID positive, with care for 35 patients, just 3 nurses. Let that sink in. How can each nurse get to each patient?
There are so many patients that a 2,500-bed field hospital meant for those suffering from other illnesses is being converted to a COVID-19 treatment center. New York City is now allowing crematoriums to operate 24 hours a day. The state is on the verge of running out of ventilators.
So I'm going to sign an executive order that says the state can take ventilators and PPE from institutions that don't need them now and redeploy them to other parts of the state.
This will go down in history as a profound failure of our national government.
Governors are pleading for help from Washington. They've been given just a fraction of the supplies requested. Many states have refused to issue stay-at-home orders, the White House still hasn't issued a national directive.
If you look at what's going on in this country, I just don't understand why we're not doing that.
All the while, the number of dead rises by hundreds every day.
This coronavirus is for real.
Detroit bus driver Jason Hargrove tried to sound the alarm about the risks he faced transporting the public. He died from the virus this week in a city that, like New York, has seen the number of deaths and illnesses surge at an alarming rate.
The Centers for Disease Control has now formalized its recommendation that Americans wear cloth masks over their faces when out in public, but not surgical-grade masks to preserve them for medical workers. At the same time, the White House now says that anyone coming into regular contact with the president or vice president will first have to be cleared with a rapid coronavirus test. Donna?
Jackson Proskow in Washington, thanks. Hundreds of Canadians from 2 Holland America cruise ships are now back in Canada. Canadian passengers boarded a plane in Fort Lauderdale, Florida this morning, bound for Toronto. A document obtained by Global News shows 243 passengers were expected to board that flight. They will be screened here in Canada and subject to mandatory 14-day self-isolation. The cruise ships, one of which had confirmed cases of COVID-19 on board, were granted permission to dock at Port Everglades yesterday. Jeff will continue to consult with experts and try to answer your questions. Send them to yourquestions@globalnews.ca. And on our website, you'll find a special page dedicated entirely to COVID-19. That's at globalnews.ca/coronavirus.